Act like you are my Luna tonight.
Congratulations on marrying my ex-fiancé, the devastatingly handsome stranger whispered against her ear, his breath unnaturally warm. Now smile like you don't want to tear his throat out. Kira Nakamura nearly jumped out of her skin. She'd been sitting alone at table 12, the dreaded singles table, watching her younger sister Katie dance with her new husband while nursing her third glass of champagne and contemplating the various ways she could disappear without anyone noticing. She turned to face the stranger who'd somehow materialized beside her chair without making a sound. Golden eyes met hers, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. The man was impossibly beautiful in a way that made her think of marble sculptures and dangerous predators. His black hair was perfectly tousled, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and he wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than her car. "Excuse me," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your ex," he said, nodding toward the dance floor where Marcus, her ex-boyfriend of 2 years, was spinning his perfectly blonde, perfectly petite girlfriend in circles. "The best man. He's been watching you all evening with that smug little smile. Thought you might want to wipe it off his face." Heat rushed to Kira's cheeks. Of course Marcus was watching. Of course he was enjoying her humiliation. Her +1 had bailed at the last minute, leaving her to face her sister's wedding solo while Marcus paraded around with Brittany, the yoga instructor he'd left her for 6 months ago. "I don't know who you are," Kira said, trying to sound braver than she felt, but... "Zane Voronov." He extended a hand, and when she reluctantly shook it, his skin was fever-hot. "And you're Kira Nakamura, bride's sister, marketing manager at Nakamura and Associates, and currently plotting at least 3 different ways to murder your ex without getting blood on that gorgeous dress." She stared at him. "How do you? I make it my business to know things." His smile was all sharp edges. "Now, do you want to keep sitting here letting him think he broke you, or do you want to show him exactly what he lost?" Before she could answer, Marcus appeared at their table with Brittany attached to his arm like a designer accessory. His brown hair was slightly mussed from dancing, and his face wore that particular expression of false concern that had once fooled her into thinking he actually cared. "Soft." Marcus's voice carried that condescending tone she'd grown to hate. "There you are. I was worried when I didn't see you on the dance floor. Everything okay?" Brittany giggled, actually giggled, and pressed closer to Marcus. "Maybe she just needs the right partner," she said in a voice like cotton candy. "It's so hard to dance alone." The pity in their eyes made Kira want to crawl under the table. Or throw her champagne at them. She was debating which option would cause less of a scene when Zane's arms slipped around her waist. "Sorry I'm late, sweetheart," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through her bones. Traffic was murder. Kira's mouth fell open. She started to protest, but Zane's fingers pressed gently against her ribs in warning. "Marcus, isn't it?" Zane rose gracefully, and Kira realized he was tall, really tall. He towered over Marcus by at least 6 inches. "The best man. Kira's told me so much about you." Marcus's confident smile faltered. His eyes darted between Zane's expensive suit and the way the man's arm remained possessively around Kira's waist. "I'm sorry, have we met?" "Zane Voronov." He didn't offer his hand, and somehow that made the introduction feel like a dismissal. "I've been traveling for business. Just got back in time for the wedding." "Voronov." Marcus frowned, recognition dawning. "As in Voronov Industries?" "The same." Kira felt her eyes widen. Even she knew that name. Voronov Industries was a massive conglomerate that seemed to have fingers in everything from real estate to renewable energy. She'd seen articles about the mysterious CEO in business magazines, though the photos were always shadowy or taken from a distance. Brittany was practically vibrating with excitement. "Oh my God, you're like, super rich, aren't you?" Zane's smile could have frozen fire. "I do well enough." Marcus cleared his throat, his face red. "Well, it's great that Kira found someone. After our breakup, I was worried she might have trouble moving on. Moving on? Zane's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, and Kira could have sworn she felt a tremor run through the floor. From you? The temperature at their table seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus actually took a step back, his face paling. I just meant that you were concerned about a woman you abandoned? Zane's golden eyes were fixed on Marcus with predatory intensity. How thoughtful. Kira stared up at this mysterious man who'd appeared out of nowhere to defend her honor. There was something almost supernatural about the way he commanded the space around him, the way Marcus, who'd never backed down from anything in the 2 years she'd known him, was practically cowering. We should get back to our table, Brittany said quickly, tugging on Marcus's arm. The cake cutting is starting soon. They fled without another word. Kira waited until they were out of earshot before turning to face her supposed boyfriend. What the hell was that? Zane's arm was still around her waist, and she was acutely aware of the heat radiating from his body, the way his fingers seemed to burn through the silk of her dress. That, he said, was me saving you from the most awkward conversation of your life. By pretending to be my boyfriend? Did you have a better plan? She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Because the truth was, seeing the look on Marcus's face when he'd realized she was supposedly dating a billionaire had been the most satisfying moment she'd had in months. You could have asked first, she said weakly. Would you have said yes? No. Exactly. His thumb traced a small circle on her hip, and she shivered. Besides, the evening's not over. He's still watching. Still hoping to see you fall apart. Kira glanced toward the head table where Marcus was seated. Sure enough, his eyes were fixed on them, his jaw tight with what looked suspiciously like jealousy. What do you want from me? She asked. Zane's smile was slow and dangerous. Dance with me. What? One dance. Let me show your ex exactly what he lost. After that, if you want me to disappear, I will. She should say no. She should walk away from this beautiful stranger with his golden eyes and his mysterious motives. But Marcus was still watching, still waiting for her to crumble, and the champagne was singing in her veins. One dance, she agreed. Zane's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed sharper than they should be. He stood and offered his hand, and when she took it, that strange heat raced up her arm. He led her onto the dance floor just as the band transitioned into something slow and sultry. His arms slipped around her waist, pulling her close enough that she could feel the solid wall of his chest against her palms. You're trembling, he observed. I don't usually dance with strangers. I'm not a stranger anymore. We've been introduced. His hand was warm against the small of her back, guiding her into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Tell me, Kira Nakamura, what did the fool do to lose you? She looked up into those impossible golden eyes. What makes you think he lost me? Maybe I wasn't worth keeping. Something dangerous flickered in his gaze. Anyone who thinks that is clearly an idiot. The way he said it, with such absolute certainty, made her chest tight. When was the last time someone had looked at her like she was worth something? You don't even know me, she whispered. I know enough. His thumb brushed against her spine, and she had to bite back a gasp. I know you're stronger than you think. I know you're tired of being underestimated. And I know that every man in this room is wondering how a fool like your ex ever convinced someone like you to waste 2 years on him. Someone like me? Beautiful. Intelligent. Fierce. His voice dropped to that dangerous whisper again. The kind of woman worth fighting for. Her heart hammered against her ribs. There was something hypnotic about the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way his eyes seemed to see straight through to her soul. She felt like prey caught in the gaze of a predator, but instead of fear, all she felt was a wild, reckless excitement. Act like you're mine tonight, he murmured against her ear, and his breath was so warm it almost burned. Just for tonight. Let me show them what they're all missing. She should pull away. She should ask questions. She should demand to know who he really was and why he'd chosen to help her. Instead, she found herself nodding, drawn to this dangerous stranger like a moth to flame. And as they danced beneath the glittering lights, Kira couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a deal with the devil himself. But for the first time in months, she didn't care. Chapter 2. The dance ended too soon. Kira found herself reluctant to step away from Zane's embrace, even as the band transitioned into something more upbeat. His hands lingered on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary before he released her, and she felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. That was. She started, then trailed off, unsure how to finish. Effective, he said, his golden eyes scanning the room. Your ex looks like he swallowed something unpleasant. She followed his gaze to where Marcus sat rigidly at the head table, his jaw clenched as he watched them. Brittany was chattering animatedly beside him, apparently oblivious to his distress. Thank you, Kira said quietly. You didn't have to do that. Actually, I did. Zane's expression grew serious. Can we talk somewhere private? There's something I need to discuss with you. Her stomach fluttered with nerves. What kind of something? The kind that benefits us both. He placed his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the hotel's terrace. Trust me. The night air was cool against her heated skin as they stepped outside. The terrace overlooked the city, twinkling lights stretching out toward the horizon. A few other guests mingled near the railing, but Zane led her to a secluded corner where the shadows offered privacy. I wasn't entirely honest with you earlier, he began, leaning against the stone balustrade. About why I'm here. Kira's heart sank. Of course there was a catch. Men like Zane Voronov didn't rescue random women out of the kindness of their hearts. I'm listening, she said, crossing her arms. I'm in town on business. Voronov Industries is looking to acquire a tech startup, one that's been hemorrhaging money for the past 18 months despite having some genuinely innovative patents. What does that have to do with me? Zane's smile was rueful. The company is called Novatech Solutions. I believe you know the founder. It took her a moment to connect the dots. David? My brother-in-law David? The very same. Zane straightened, his expression becoming businesslike. He's drowning in debt, Kira. The company will be bankrupt within 6 months if nothing changes. I can save it, and his marriage to your sister, but there's a complication. Kira's mind reeled. She'd known David's company was struggling, but bankruptcy? Katie had never mentioned anything about financial problems. Then again, her sister had always been good at hiding unpleasant truths. What kind of complication? She asked. The deal requires approval from a very conservative board of investors. Old money, traditional values. They're concerned about my reputation. Your reputation? Zane ran a hand through his dark hair. I'm 34, unmarried, and there have been rumors about my personal life. Nothing scandalous, but enough to make them question my stability. They want to see that I'm settled, committed to building something lasting rather than just accumulating wealth. And you want me to pretend to be your girlfriend. The pieces clicked together with uncomfortable clarity. That's what this is really about. A mutually beneficial arrangement, he confirmed. You get to save face in front of your ex and your family. I get the appearance of domestic bliss that will satisfy the board. Everyone wins. Kira stared out at the city lights, her mind spinning. It made sense in a twisted sort of way. But it also felt like she was stepping into something far more complicated than a simple charade. For how long? She asked. A few weeks. Maybe a month. Just until the deal closes. And what exactly would this arrangement entail? Zane moved closer, and she caught that strange scent again, something wild and untamed beneath expensive cologne. Public appearances. A few business dinners. Nothing you couldn't handle. What's in it for me? Besides avoiding Marcus's smug looks? $50,000. Kira's breath caught. $50,000 would cover her student loans, her credit card debt, and still leave enough for a decent emergency fund. It would change everything. You're serious, she said. Deadly serious. His golden eyes held hers. What do you say, Kira Nakamura? Ready to help me close the biggest deal of my career? She should say no. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that this was insane. But the alternative was watching David's company collapse, possibly taking Katie's marriage down with it, while she struggled to make ends meet on her marketing salary. All right, she said before she could change her mind. But I have conditions. Zane's smile returned, sharp and satisfied. Name them. This is strictly business. No, complications. Define complications. Heat rushed to her cheeks. You know what I mean. I do. And I agree. Anything else? I want to know more about you. If I'm going to pretend to be your girlfriend, I need to know enough to be convincing. Fair enough. He glanced toward the terrace doors. We should head back inside. People will start to notice we're missing. They returned to find dinner being served. Zane escorted her to his table. Somehow he'd managed to secure seats at table 3, close enough to the head table to be noticed but far enough away to have private conversations. The other guests at their table were clearly curious about the mysterious billionaire who'd appeared out of nowhere. Zane handled their questions with practiced charm, revealing just enough about himself to satisfy curiosity without giving away any real information. So what line of work are you in, Mr. Voronov? Asked Mrs. Peterson, Katie's former piano teacher and notorious gossip. Acquisitions, Zane replied smoothly. I help struggling companies find new life. How noble, she simpered. And how did you and our Kira meet? Kira tensed, realizing they hadn't discussed their fictional origin story. But Zane didn't miss a beat. Through mutual friends, he said, his hand finding hers on the table. The moment I saw her, I knew she was special. The way he said it, with such quiet conviction, made her heart skip. She had to remind herself it was all an act. The servers began placing plates in front of the guests, herb-crusted salmon with seasonal vegetables. The aroma made Kira's stomach growl. She'd been too nervous to eat much all day. She noticed Zane didn't touch his food. Not hungry? She asked quietly. I ate earlier, he said, but her eyes kept drifting toward the terrace, waiting for Zane to return. He didn't. 20 minutes later, she finally went looking for him. The terrace was empty except for a few smokers huddled near the far end. She checked the hotel bar, the lobby, even the men's restroom, after asking a passing waiter to do a quick check. Nothing. He'd vanished completely. Kira returned to their table feeling foolish and oddly abandoned. Had he changed his mind about their arrangement? Had the whole thing been some elaborate joke? Just as she was considering calling a cab, he reappeared. Sorry, he said, sliding back into his seat as if nothing had happened. Business call. For 40 minutes? His jaw tightened. It was important. There was something different about him now. His hair was slightly disheveled, and she could swear his clothes looked rumpled, as if he'd been running. Or fighting. And was it her imagination, or did his eyes seem brighter than before? Are you all right? She asked. Fine. His tone brooked no argument. Ready to go? I think we've made our point for one evening. She wanted to press him for answers, but something in his expression warned her off. Instead, she nodded and gathered her purse. They said their goodbyes to Katie and David. Her sister looked radiant and blissfully unaware of the financial troubles threatening her new marriage. Marcus made a point of shaking Zane's hand and wishing them well, his smile so forced it looked painful. I'll drive you home, Zane said as they waited for the valet to bring his car. You don't have to. I insist. The valet pulled up in a sleek black Lamborghini that probably cost more than Kira's annual salary. Zane tipped the young man generously and held the passenger door open for her. The interior was all black leather and polished chrome, impossibly luxurious. Kira settled into the seat, trying not to think about how out of place she felt in such an expensive car. Zane slid behind the wheel and started the engine, which purred to life with barely a whisper of sound. As they pulled out of the hotel's circular drive, Kira found herself studying his profile in the dashboard lights. "So," she said as they merged onto the freeway, "tell me about yourself. If we're going to convince people we're dating, I should know more than just your net worth. What do you want to know?" "The basics. Where are you from? Family? Hobbies?" Zane was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally, he said, "I grew up in Montana. Small town, middle of nowhere. My parents died when I was young, car accident. No siblings." "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "It was a long time ago. What about hobbies? What do you do when you're not acquiring failing tech companies?" Another pause. "I run. A lot. Helps me think. That's it? I'm a simple man, Kira." She almost laughed at that. Nothing about Zane Voronov was simple. He was a puzzle wrapped in an enigma, and every answer just raised more questions. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the city lights blurring past the windows. Kira found herself relaxing despite her confusion. There was something soothing about the car's smooth motion and the quiet confidence with which Zane navigated the late-night traffic. She was almost dozing when she shifted in her seat and felt something rough against her hip. Looking down, she saw deep gouges in the leather upholstery, 4 parallel tears that looked exactly like claw marks. Her blood went cold. "Zane," she said carefully, "what happened to your seat?" He followed her gaze and cursed under his breath. "Accident," he said tersely. "I was moving some equipment last week." Sharp corners. But even as he said it, Kira could tell he was lying. She'd seen enough nature documentaries to recognize claw marks when she saw them. And these were big, bigger than any house cat could make. What kind of animal could tear through leather like that? And why would Zane Voronov, billionaire CEO, be transporting wild animals in his Lamborghini? As they pulled into her apartment complex, Kira's mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. She was beginning to realize that accepting Zane's proposition might have been the biggest mistake of her life. But as he walked her to her door, his hand warm and steady on her back, she found herself hoping she was wrong. Because despite all the red flags, despite all the unanswered questions, she was already falling under the spell of the mysterious man who'd rescued her from humiliation. Even if she was starting to suspect he might be far more dangerous than Marcus had ever been. Chapter 3. The contract arrived at Kira's apartment the next morning via courier, 20 pages of dense legal text that made her head spin. She sat at her tiny Kit Nakamura table, nursing her second cup of coffee and trying to make sense of the formal language that basically boiled down to, pretend to be Zane Voronov's girlfriend for 30 days, don't tell anyone it's fake, and receive $50,000. It should have felt like a miracle. The money would solve everything, her credit card debt, her student loans, and most importantly, the overdue mortgage on her father's bookshop. Nakamura's Corner Books had been her father's dream, a cozy little haven tucked between a vintage clothing store and a coffee roastery in the city's arts district. When he died 2 years ago from a sudden heart attack, Kira had inherited both the shop and its mounting debts. She'd been struggling to keep it afloat ever since, working her marketing day job while spending evenings and weekends managing inventory and serving the handful of loyal customers who still preferred physical books to digital ones. The foreclosure notice had arrived 3 weeks ago. She had until the end of the month to come up with the back payments, or the bank would take the one piece of her father she had left. $50,000 would save the bookshop and give her breathing room to figure out a long-term plan. All she had to do was pretend to be in love with a man who disappeared during full moon toasts and had claw marks in his car. Her phone buzzed with a text, "Dinner tonight at Aurelius, 7 p.m. Dress nicely. D." Kira stared at the message. Aurelius was the kind of restaurant where entrees started at $60 and you needed reservations months in advance. The kind of place she'd never been able to afford, even when she was dating Marcus and splitting everything 50-50. She texted back, "This is really happening?" His response was immediate, "Contract signed?" She looked down at the papers, at the signature line that would bind her to this bizarre arrangement. Taking a deep breath, she signed her name with a flourish and took a photo to send to him. "See you at 7, came his reply. The rest of the day passed in a blur of nervous energy. Kira closed the bookshop early and spent 2 hours getting ready, raiding her closet for something appropriate for Aurelius. She finally settled on a black wrap dress she'd bought for job interviews, professional but elegant, with a neckline that was demure enough for business but still showed she was a woman. Zane was waiting for her outside the restaurant when her Uber pulled up. He looked devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, his dark hair perfectly styled and those unsettling golden eyes tracking her movement as she approached. "You look beautiful," he said, offering his arm. "Thank you." She tried to ignore the way her pulse quickened when their skin touched. This was business, she reminded herself. Nothing more. Aurelius was everything she'd expected: dim lighting, pristine white tablecloths, servers who moved like ghosts between tables filled with the city's elite. The maitre d' greeted Zane by name and led them to a corner table with a view of the city lights. "Have you eaten here before?" Kira asked as they settled into their seats. "A few times. The food is adequate." Zane's eyes swept the dining room with the alertness of a predator surveying its territory. "But it's the kind of place people expect to see us." "Us?" "A successful businessman and his girlfriend." His smile was sharp. "We need to be seen, Kira. Photographed. The goal is to make sure word gets back to the investors that I'm a reformed bachelor." As if summoned by his words, a flash went off near the entrance. Kira turned to see a photographer being escorted out by security, but not before he'd gotten several shots of their table. "That was fast," she murmured. "I may have tipped off a few gossip columnists about our dinner plans." Zane's expression was unapologetic. "By tomorrow morning, we'll be in 3 different society pages." "You really don't leave anything to chance, do you?" "I can't afford to. This deal is worth too much." Their server appeared, a young man with nervous energy who introduced himself as Trevor and rattled off the evening specials. Zane ordered wine without consulting the list, some vintage that made Trevor's eyes widen with recognition. "And to eat?" Trevor asked, pen poised over his notepad. "The lady will have the salmon," Zane said before Kira could open her mouth. "I'll have the steak, rare." Kira blinked. "Actually, I was thinking about the pasta." "The salmon is better here," Zane cut her off smoothly. "Trust me." Trevor nodded and hurried away, leaving Kira staring across the table at her fake boyfriend. "Did you just order for me?" "I did." Zane seemed completely unbothered by her incredulous tone. "Problem?" "I'm capable of reading a menu and making my own choices." "Of course you are. But we're putting on a show, remember? A certain type of man expects to take care of these details for his woman." "His woman?" Her voice pitched higher. "Are you serious right now?" Zane leaned forward, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper she was beginning to recognize. "We discussed this, Kira. You're playing a role. The investors I need to impress are old-fashioned, traditional. They want to see that I can provide, that I'm in control." "In control of what?" "My dinner choices. In control of my life. My relationships. My future." His golden eyes held hers steadily. "For the next month, that includes you." The possessive way he said it sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. She told herself it was annoyance, not attraction. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "But next time, ask first." "Next time, I'll consider it." Trevor returned with the wine. A bottle that probably cost more than Kira's monthly grocery budget. Zane tasted it with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this countless times, then nodded his approval. "So," Kira said as Trevor poured their glasses, "tell me about this business deal that's worth all this trouble." Zane swirled his wine but didn't drink. "Your brother-in-law's company has developed some interesting technology. Predictive algorithms that could revolutionize several industries. But David Nakamura is a brilliant programmer and a terrible businessman. He's hemorrhaging money on unnecessary overhead, failed marketing campaigns, and partnerships with companies that are bleeding him dry. Kira's chest tightened. She'd suspected David was struggling, but hearing it laid out so bluntly was jarring. How bad is it? Bad enough that he'll lose everything if someone doesn't intervene soon. Zane finally took a sip of wine. I can save the company, but only if I can convince my investors that I'm a stable, long-term prospect. Hence our arrangement. And if you can't convince them? His smile was cold. Then your sister's husband declares bankruptcy, their marriage implodes under the financial stress, and several dozen employees lose their jobs. No pressure. Before Kira could respond, she became aware of a change in the restaurant's atmosphere. Conversations had grown quieter, servers moved with increased urgency, and several diners were glancing toward the entrance with poorly concealed nervousness. Zane had gone completely still, that inhuman stillness she'd noticed at the wedding. His nostrils flared slightly, as if he was scenting the air, and his hand tightened around his wine glass. What? Kira began, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. Don't turn around, he said quietly. But we have company. Despite his warning, she couldn't help but glance toward the entrance. What she saw made her blood run cold. A man had entered, tall, pale, and sharp-featured, with platinum blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice. He was accompanied by 3 other men, all of whom shared the same unnaturally pale complexion and predatory grace. They moved through the restaurant like wolves, and other diners seemed to instinctively shy away from them. Viktor Morozov, Zane said, his voice barely audible. This complicates things. Who is he? Competition. The pale man's gaze swept the dining room and landed on their table. His lips curved in a smile that held no warmth, and he began walking toward them with purposeful strides. Zane Voronov, Viktor said as he approached, his accent faintly Eastern European. What a delightful surprise. Zane rose from his chair with fluid grace, and Kira was struck by how the 2 men faced each other, like alpha predators meeting on neutral ground. The temperature around their table seemed to drop 10 degrees. Viktor. Zane's voice was carefully neutral. I wasn't aware you were in town. Business brings me here, as I'm sure it does you. Viktor's pale eyes shifted to Kira, and she suppressed a shudder. There was something deeply unsettling about his gaze, something that made her skin crawl. And who is this lovely creature? Kira Nakamura, Zane said, moving slightly so he was between her and Viktor. My girlfriend. Ah. Viktor's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed unusually sharp. How domestic of you. The 3 men who'd accompanied Viktor spread out slightly, taking positions that blocked the nearest exits. Other diners were beginning to notice the tension, conversations stopping mid-sentence as people sensed something predatory in the air. If you'll excuse us, Zane said, we were just finishing our meal. Of course. I wouldn't want to interrupt such an intimate evening. Viktor's gaze lingered on Kira for a moment too long. Perhaps we'll see each other again soon. It sounded like a threat. Viktor and his associates moved to a table across the room, but Kira could feel their eyes on her throughout the rest of the meal. The tension was suffocating, like the moments before a thunderstorm when the air itself seems to vibrate with barely contained energy. Who is he really? Kira asked when their food arrived. Someone who wants what I want, Zane replied, cutting into his steak with more force than necessary. She noticed he'd ordered it so rare it was practically bleeding. And who isn't particularly concerned about collateral damage? Meaning? Meaning you should stay away from him. Zane's golden eyes met hers across the table. Promise me, Kira. If you see him again, anywhere, you call me immediately. The intensity in his voice made her mouth go dry. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. They ate in relative silence after that, the weight of Viktor's presence casting a shadow over the evening. Kira picked at her salmon, her appetite gone, while Zane devoured his steak with an efficiency that seemed almost animalistic. Trevor appeared to refill their wine glasses, his hands shaking slightly as he navigated between the 2 groups of predatory men. As he leaned over to pour Kira's wine, his trembling grew worse. It happened in slow motion. The wine bottle slipped from Trevor's nervous fingers, red liquid splashing across the white tablecloth and onto Kira's dress. She gasped as the cold wine soaked through the fabric, staining the black material. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," Trevor stammered, grabbing napkins from the neighboring table. "I'm so clumsy, please let me." He never finished the sentence. Zane was on his feet so fast Kira's eyes could barely track the movement. His hand shot out and grabbed Trevor by the throat, lifting the young man nearly off his feet. Trevor's eyes went wide with terror as Zane's face transformed into something savage and inhuman. His eyes blazed gold. Not the warm amber they'd been moments before, but a brilliant, otherworldly gold that seemed to burn with inner fire. His lips pulled back in a snarl, revealing teeth that looked far too sharp to be human. "You touched her," Zane growled, his voice dropping to a register that seemed to vibrate through the floor itself. Trevor made a choked sound, his feet barely touching the ground as Zane held him suspended. Other diners were starting to stare, some pulling out phones to record the confrontation. "Zane," Kira said sharply, standing and placing a hand on his arm. The muscle beneath his suit jacket was rigid with tension, and she could feel heat radiating from his skin. "Let him go. It was an accident." For a moment, she wasn't sure he'd hurt her. His golden eyes remained fixed on Trevor's terrified face, and she could see the pulse hammering in the young man's throat where Zane's fingers pressed against his windpipe. Then, slowly, awareness flickered back into those burning eyes. Zane's grip loosened, and Trevor dropped to his feet, gasping and stumbling backward. "I'm sorry," Zane said, his voice returning to normal as his eyes faded back to their usual amber. "I overreacted." Trevor nodded frantically, too shaken to speak, and fled toward the Kit Nakamura without looking back. Kira stared at the man she'd agreed to pretend to love, her heart pounding with fear and something else she didn't want to name. Around them, the restaurant buzzed with whispered conversations and the click of camera phones. Across the room, Viktor Morozov watched with obvious amusement, raising his wine glass in a mocking toast before taking a delicate sip. "We should go," Zane said quietly, pulling out his wallet and throwing several $100 bills on the table. "Now." Kira nodded mutely, gathering her purse with hands that shook only slightly. As they walked toward the exit, she was acutely aware of the stairs following them, of Viktor's cold laughter echoing behind them. In the space of 5 minutes, her fake boyfriend had revealed himself to be something far more dangerous than she'd imagined. His eyes had literally glowed gold, his strength had been inhuman, and the rage that had consumed him over something as simple as spilled wine suggested a barely leashed violence that terrified her. But as they stepped out into the cool night air and Zane's hands settled protectively on her back, she realized that her fear was tinged with something else entirely. Because despite everything she'd just witnessed, or maybe because of it, she was more attracted to him than ever. And that might be the most dangerous thing of all. Chapter 4. The dream started 3 days after their dinner at Aurelius. Kira woke gasping in her narrow bed, sheets soaked with sweat and her heart hammering against her ribs. The taste of earth and pine lingered on her tongue, and she could swear she still felt the phantom sensation of powerful muscles bunching and releasing as whatever she'd been in the dream, raced through moonlit forest at impossible speeds. In the dream, she'd been running. Not jogging like she sometimes did in the mornings, but truly running with a predator's fluid grace, her body low to the ground and perfectly balanced. The world had been alive with scents and sounds her human senses could never detect, the musk of deer 20 yards ahead, the rustle of mice in the underbrush, the distant howl of something that called to her very soul. And most disturbing of all, it had felt right. Natural. Like coming home after years of exile. She stumbled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face, trying to wash away the lingering effects of the dream. But when she caught sight of herself in the mirror, she froze. Her eyes looked different. Still brown, but somehow brighter, more alert. And there were dark circles under them that hadn't been there before, not from tiredness, but from something else. Something that made her look wild. "Get it together, Nakamura," she muttered to her reflection. It was just a weird dream. But as she headed to the Kit Nakamura to start coffee, she noticed other changes. The soft padding of her bare feet on the hardwood floor sounded unnaturally loud, and she could hear Mrs. Rodriguez's television through the wall with perfect clarity, something that had never happened before. Even more unsettling, she could smell things with startling intensity, the lingering scent of yesterday's takeout, the fabric softener from the laundry room 2 floors down, and something else. Something wild and masculine that made her pulse quicken with recognition. Zane. She spun toward the front door just as his knock echoed through the apartment. How had she known he was there before he'd even announced himself? "Good morning," he said when she opened the door, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit despite the early hour. "I brought coffee." He held up a paper bag from her favorite cafe, the expensive one she could rarely afford. The aroma hit her like a physical force, so rich and complex she could practically taste the notes of chocolate and vanilla. "How did you know I'd be up?" she asked, accepting the bag with hands that trembled slightly. "Lucky guess." His golden eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You look tired." "Sleeping poorly?" "Just strange dreams." She turned away, not wanting him to see how his presence affected her. The scent of him, pine and leather and something indefinably male, was overwhelming in the small space of her apartment. "What kind of dreams?" The question was casual, but something in his tone made her look back at him. He was standing perfectly still again, that predatory stillness that always unsettled her. "Running dreams," she said carefully. "Probably just stress." Zane moved closer, and she caught herself taking a step back. Not from fear, but from the sudden, inexplicable urge to press herself against him and breathe in that intoxicating scent until she was dizzy with it. What the hell was wrong with her? "We have a breakfast meeting with potential investors," he said, apparently oblivious to her internal turmoil. "We're something conservative but expensive looking. I'll pick you up in an hour." "I don't have anything expensive looking." "Check your closet." She stared at him. "What do you mean, check my closet?" His smile was sharp and unapologetic. "I took the liberty of having a few things delivered. Consider it part of our arrangement. You need to look the part if you're going to convince people we're together." Heat flashed through her, anger, she told herself, though it felt suspiciously like something else entirely. "You bought me clothes?" "Without asking?" "I bought my girlfriend clothes," he corrected smoothly. "There's a difference." "The hell there is." She crossed her arms, trying to ignore the way his eyes tracked the movement. "I can dress myself, Zane. I'm not some charity case you need to rescue." Something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe, or approval. "No, you're not. But you are mine for the next month, and I take care of what's mine." The possessive edge in his voice sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. Before she could respond, he was moving toward her, closing the distance between them with that fluid grace that always reminded her of a stalking cat. "Check your closet, Kira," he said softly, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper. "Then get ready. We have work to do." He was gone before she could argue further, leaving her apartment filled with his scent and her body humming with an energy she didn't understand. In her bedroom, she found her tiny closet transformed. Designer dresses hung beside tailored blazers, silk blouses arranged by color next to shoes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Everything was in her exact size, as if he'd somehow memorized her measurements. She selected a navy suit that fit her perfectly, too perfectly, and tried not to think about how he'd known her size so precisely. The breakfast meeting was held at Zane's penthouse, a sprawling space 40 floors above the city with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view. Kira had never been anywhere so luxurious, and she felt distinctly out of place despite the expensive clothes. The investors were exactly what she'd expected, 3 older men in impeccable suits who spoke in numbers and percentages while sipping coffee that probably cost more per pound than most people made in a day. They treated her with polite dismissal, the way powerful men had always treated women they considered decorative accessories. But something strange happened during the meeting. Every time one of them spoke, she found herself picking up subtle cues she'd never noticed before, micro-expressions, changes in scent that suggested nervousness or deception, the slight variations in heart rate that indicated when someone was lying. When Harrison Webb, the lead investor, claimed his concerns about Zane's stability were purely financial, she caught the spike of something else in his scent. Fear, maybe. Or jealousy. When Patricia Holbrook mentioned her daughter's recent engagement, Kira smelled sadness beneath the proud words, suggesting the relationship wasn't as perfect as she claimed. And when the third investor, Marcus Kane, praised the innovative aspects of David's technology, his elevated heart rate told her he was hiding something significant. It was like having a superpower, being able to read people on levels they weren't even aware of. But it was also deeply unsettling, because she had no idea how or why it was happening. The meeting went well, better than well, actually. By the end, all three investors seemed convinced that Zane was a stable, long-term prospect. They shook hands on moving forward with the deal, and Kira found herself the recipient of approving smiles and comments about what a positive influence she was. "You were perfect," Zane said after they'd left, his hands settling on her lower back as they stood by the windows overlooking the city. "They bought it completely." "Bought what?" "That we're together. That you're good for me." His fingers traced small circles through the silk of her blouse, and she had to bite back a gasp at the sensation. "They think you've tamed me." "Have I?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, and Zane went very still behind her. When she turned to face him, his golden eyes were blazing with an intensity that made her knees weak. "No," he said quietly. "But you've done something far more dangerous." "What?" Instead of answering, he moved closer, backing her against the window. The glass was cool against her shoulders, but the man in front of her radiated heat like a furnace. "You've made me want to be tamed," he murmured, his hands bracing against the window on either side of her head. Then he was kissing her, and every rational thought fled her mind. His mouth was hot and demanding, claiming her with a possessiveness that should have terrified her but instead sent liquid fire racing through her veins. She found herself kissing him back with a desperation that shocked her, her hands fisting in his suit jacket as she tried to pull him closer. When his teeth grazed her throat, she arched against him with a soft moan, completely lost to the sensations flooding her system. She felt him smile against her skin before he bit down gently on the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. The pleasure that shot through her was so intense it was almost painful. She cried out, her nails digging into his shoulders as her body convulsed with sensation. "Mine," he growled against her throat, his voice rough with need. "You're mine, Kira." And in that moment, with his scent surrounding her and his teeth marking her skin, she believed him. It wasn't until later, when she was back in her own apartment, that she noticed the mark he'd left. 2 small puncture wounds surrounded by a bruise that looked suspiciously like a bite mark. She touched it gingerly, surprised by how tender it was. A love bite, she told herself. Men left them all the time. But this felt different. More permanent somehow, like a brand that went deeper than skin. That night, the dreams were more vivid than ever. She was running again, but this time she wasn't alone. A massive black wolf ran beside her, its golden eyes familiar even in the moonlight. They moved together like partners in an ancient dance, perfectly synchronized as they raced through the forest. When she woke, she could still feel the phantom sensation of paws hitting the ground, still taste the metallic tang of blood on her tongue from a hunch she couldn't quite remember. And the mark on her throat was throbbing with a heat that had nothing to do with the bruising. Over the next week, the changes accelerated. Her senses sharpened to an almost unbearable degree. She could hear conversations from 3 blocks away, smell emotions on people like perfume, track the movement of every living thing in her vicinity. Food began to taste different. Cooked meat left her unsatisfied, while the scent of rare steak made her mouth water with an almost violent hunger. Her body was changing too. She was stronger, faster, more agile. When a client's dog broke free from its leash and ran into traffic, she moved without thinking, snatching the animal from the path of an oncoming bus with reflexes that shouldn't have been humanly possible. And through it all, she dreamed of the wolf with golden eyes, of running under a moon that called to something wild in her soul. She managed to hide the changes for exactly 8 days. On the 9th day, she was in her bookshop when the scent hit her, pine and leather and dangerous masculinity that made her body respond with embarrassing intensity. She looked up to find Zane standing in the doorway, his golden eyes studying her with predatory focus. "You've been avoiding me," he said, moving through the narrow aisles with fluid grace. "I've been busy." She tried to sound casual, but her voice came out breathless and needy. "Have you?" He was close now, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Or have you been scared?" "Of what?" "Of what's happening to you." The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd been trying so hard to convince herself that the changes were just stress, just her imagination running wild. But the way he said it, with such quiet certainty. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" His hand reached out to trace the mark on her throat, and she couldn't suppress her shiver of response. "The dreams, Kira. The enhanced senses. The way your body craves things it never wanted before." She stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "How do you know about the dreams?" "Because I've been having them too." His thumb brushed over the bite mark, and she gasped at the sensation. "We're connected now." "Have been since the moment I marked you." "Marked me?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Claimed you." His golden eyes burned into hers. "Made you mine in the most fundamental way possible." "I don't understand." Zane stepped back, his expression becoming deadly serious. "Then let me make it clear. Werewolves exist, Kira. We live hidden among humans, bound by ancient laws and older magic. I'm what's called an alpha, the leader of a pack, born with the strength and instincts to protect and command." She should laugh. Should tell him he was insane and demand he leave her shop. Instead, she found herself nodding, pieces of a puzzle she'd been trying to ignore finally clicking into place. "And me?" she asked quietly. "You're my mate. My destined partner, chosen by forces older than civilization itself." His voice softened. "The bite mark isn't just a love bite, Kira. It's a claiming mark. It's awakening the wolf that was always inside you." "That's impossible. I'm human." "Are you?" His smile was sad and beautiful. "Have you ever wondered why you've always felt different? Why you never quite fit in anywhere? Why the moon calls to you in ways you can't explain?" She had wondered. All her life, she'd felt like she was wearing a costume that didn't quite fit, playing a role that wasn't quite right. Even as a child, she'd been drawn to wild places, had dreams of running and hunting and belonging to something larger than herself. "My parents were human," Zane agreed. "But somewhere in your bloodline, there's wolf heritage. Dormant, waiting for the right trigger to awaken it. And you were that trigger." "Yes." She sank into the chair behind her counter, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. "This is insane. I know it's overwhelming." "Overwhelming?" She laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You're telling me I'm turning into a werewolf because you bit me during what we did in your penthouse. The claiming mark activates dormant wolf genetics. But Kira, there's something else. Something I need you to understand." He moved closer, his expression grave. "The changes you're experiencing, the strength of your wolf, it's unlike anything I've seen before." "What do you mean?" "I mean your bloodline isn't just any wolf heritage." His golden eyes met hers steadily. "You're descended from the Shadow Moon pack." The name hit her like a physical blow, though she had no idea why. Something deep inside her responded to those words with a mixture of longing and fear. "I've never heard of them. Because they've been extinct for over a century. They were the most powerful werewolf bloodline in existence, capable of things other wolves could only dream of. Their pack leaders could command any wolf regardless of pack loyalty. Their females could heal mortal wounds with their touch. Their young could shift at will from birth." Kira stared at him, her world tilting on its axis. "And you think I'm?" "I know you are. The strength of your awakening, the intensity of your changes, only Shadow Moon blood could produce effects this dramatic. Zane's expression darkened. Which means you're in more danger than you can possibly imagine. What kind of danger? Every pack in the world has been searching for a Shadow Moon descendant for generations. They believe that bonding with one, claiming one as mate, would grant them access to that legendary power. His voice dropped to a growl. Viktor Morozov isn't just my business rival, Kira. He's the alpha of a pack that's been hunting Shadow Moon bloodlines for decades. The memory of those cold, pale eyes studying her at Aurelius made her shiver. He knows what I am. He suspects. And if he confirms it? Zane's hands clenched into fists. He'll do everything in his power to take you from me. To claim me himself. Yes. The word hung between them like a death sentence. Kira closed her eyes, trying to process everything he'd told her. Werewolves. Fated mates. Ancient bloodlines. A month ago, her biggest worry had been paying her credit card bill on time. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now we prepare. Zane's voice was grim with determination. Because Viktor isn't the only one who'll come for you once word spreads. Every power-hungry alpha in the world will see you as the key to ultimate dominance. And you? She opened her eyes to meet his gaze. What do you see me as? For a moment, his carefully controlled expression cracked, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. As the other half of my soul, he said quietly. The woman I'd die to protect and kill to keep. The intensity in his voice stole her breath. But beneath the fear and confusion, she felt something else stirring. Something that recognized the truth in his words, that responded to the possessive claim in his voice with a hunger she'd never experienced before. She was changing, becoming something beyond human understanding. But as terrifying as that was, she was no longer facing it alone. Because whatever she was becoming, whatever dangers lay ahead, she belonged to the golden-eyed predator who'd marked her as his own. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to keep her alive. Chapter 5. The call came at 3 a.m. Kira jolted awake in Zane's penthouse, her enhanced senses immediately cataloging everything wrong about the sound. The ringtone was hers, but the phone was across the room on the nightstand. She'd been able to hear it from the bed 40 feet away, through walls that should have muffled the sound completely. Beside her, Zane was already moving with that fluid grace that no longer seemed quite human. He'd insisted she stay at his place after the revelations in the bookshop 3 days ago, claiming her scent was too easy to track at her own apartment. She hadn't argued, not when every instinct she was developing screamed that she was being hunted. Don't answer it, Zane said sharply as she reached for the phone. But she'd already seen the caller ID. It's Katie. Her sister never called this late. Katie was the responsible one, the one who went to bed at 10 and woke up at 6:30 like clockwork. A 3 a.m. call from Katie meant something was terribly wrong. Kira swiped to answer before Zane could stop her. Katie? What's? Kira. The voice that came through the phone was male, accented, and coldly amused. How lovely to finally speak directly. Viktor Morozov. The phone nearly slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers. Across the room, Zane went completely still, his golden eyes blazing as he caught the scent of her fear. Where's my sister? Kira's voice came out steadier than she felt. Safe. For now. Viktor's tone was conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. She's a lovely girl, you're Katie. Such pretty blonde hair. It would be a shame if something happened to damage that perfection. White-hot rage flooded through Kira's system, so intense it made her vision blur. She could feel something wild and dangerous stirring beneath her skin, responding to the threat against her family with predatory fury. If you hurt her. You'll what? Viktor laughed, the sound like ice cracking. You're barely awakened, little wolf. You have no idea what you're capable of, much less how to control it. Zane appeared beside her, his hand settling on her shoulder in a gesture that was both comforting and restraining. She could feel the tension radiating from him, the barely leashed violence that suggested he was fighting every instinct to hunt down Viktor and tear his throat out. What do you want? she asked. I think you know. A trade. Your sister's life for yours. Done. No. Zane's voice was a low growl. Absolutely not. Victor's laughter grew colder. Ah, the protective alpha speaks. Tell me, Voronov, does she know the truth about why you found her? About what your real interest in David Nakamura's little company was? Kira looked at Zane sharply. What's he talking about? Zane's jaw was clenched so tightly she could see the muscle jumping. Not now. Oh, but this is the perfect time, Victor purred through the phone. You see, dear Kira, your mate's acquisition of Novatech was never about business. It was about hunting. Hunting what? Survivors. How did you find me? The same way your devoted Alpha did. Through David Nakamura's database. Amazing what people will share online these days. Family trees, DNA results, old photographs. Your father had been quite the genealogy enthusiast, hadn't he? Posted extensively about his family's European heritage, their migration patterns, even some rather interesting family legends about ancestors who could speak with wolves. Kira's legs gave out. Zane caught her before she could hit the floor, his arms wrapping around her as she processed the magnitude of Victor's revelation. Her parents hadn't just been werewolves, they'd been murdered for it. And she'd been living a lie for 20 years, thinking their deaths were a tragic accident. The beautiful irony, Victor continued, is that Voronov here was hunting the same bloodline I'd been tracking. Though I suspect his motives were rather different from mine. I wanted justice, Zane said quietly. I wanted to know why my family died. And instead, you found your mate. How poetic. Victor's amusement was palpable. Tell me, Alpha, what will you choose now? Your pack's safety or the girl's life? What do you mean? Simple. The Shadow Moon bloodline is too dangerous to be allowed to mature. Kira's powers are already manifesting. I can smell the change on her from here. Soon, she'll be strong enough to challenge any alpha, to command any wolf regardless of pack loyalty. She could build an empire. I would never. Wouldn't you? Victor's voice dropped to a whisper. When your enemies threaten everything you love? When lesser alphas try to take what's yours? The power is intoxicating, little wolf. It whispers sweet promises of control, of safety, of never having to fear again. Kira felt something dark and hungry stir in her chest at his words. The part of her that was still human recoiled from it, but the awakening wolf recognized the truth in what he said. She could feel the potential thrumming beneath her skin, the ability to command, to dominate, to ensure no one could ever hurt her family again. Here's my offer, Victor said. Bring yourself to the old Blackwood steel foundry on the south side. Come alone, and I'll let your sister live. Refuse, and I'll kill her slowly while you listen. Victor. You have 1 hour. The line went dead. Kira stared at the phone in her trembling hands, her mind racing. Katie was innocent in all this, a human woman who'd married the wrong man and gotten caught in a supernatural war she couldn't even comprehend. I have to go, she said. Like hell. Zane's voice was flat with finality. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap. But it's my sister. And you're my mate. I won't let you walk into certain death. Kira turned to face him, and for the first time since her wolf had begun awakening, she felt the full weight of what she was becoming. Power thrummed through her veins like electricity, begging to be released. You don't get to let me do anything, she said quietly. I'm not some helpless human anymore. Zane's eyes flashed gold. You're barely awakened. You have no training, no control. Then teach me. Right now. Kira. My sister is going to die because of what I am. Because of a bloodline I didn't even know I carried. Her voice was rising, and she could feel that wild energy building beneath her skin. You want to protect me? Help me save her. For a long moment, they stared at each other, alpha and emerging alpha, predator and predator. Then Zane's expression shifted, becoming coldly tactical. If we do this, we do it my way, he said. No heroic sacrifices, no surrendering yourself to save her. We go in together, we get Katie out, and we deal with Victor permanently. Together? You're my mate, Kira. My pack. Whatever we face it side by side. The drive to the foundry took 45 minutes through empty city streets. Zane had called his lieutenant, Marcus, not her ex-boyfriend Marcus, but a massive wolf who served as his second-in-command, and 2 other pack members for backup. They'd be positioned around the perimeter, ready to provide support but under strict orders not to engage unless absolutely necessary. Remember, Zane said as they approached the abandoned industrial complex, Victor wants you alive. That gives us an advantage. What if Katie's already dead? She's not. He needs her as leverage. Zane's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Victor's many things, but he's not wasteful. He'll keep her alive as long as she's useful. The Blackwood Steel Foundry had been abandoned for decades, its massive structures looming against the night sky like the bones of some prehistoric beast. Broken windows stared down at them like dead eyes, and the air carried the scent of rust and decay. And something else. Something that made Kira's newly awakened senses recoil in disgust. I smell blood, she whispered. Zane's nostrils flared. Not Katie's. Someone else. They approached the main building cautiously, every shadow a potential threat. The massive doors had been wedged open, and yellow light spilled out from somewhere deep inside the structure. Kira. Katie's voice echoed from within, high and terrified. Please, don't. The voice cut off abruptly, replaced by a sound that made Kira's blood run cold, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the building's steel framework. He's shifted, Zane said grimly. Full wolf form. That means he's done playing games. They moved through the foundry's maze of rusted machinery and abandoned workstations, following the scent trail deeper into the building. The sound of their footsteps echoed eerily in the vast space, but Kira's enhanced hearing caught other sounds, the rapid flutter of Katie's heartbeat, the soft pad of paws on concrete, and underneath it all, a low whimper of pain. They found them in the foundry's main work area, a cavernous space dominated by the skeletal remains of massive steel furnaces. Katie was bound to a support pillar in the center of the room, her face streaked with tears and a gag covering her mouth. Around her, 5 wolves prowled in a loose circle, all unnaturally pale with those same cold eyes she remembered from the restaurant. Victor stood in human form near one of the furnaces, his platinum hair gleaming in the harsh light. At his feet lay another wolf, smaller than the others, whimpering and bleeding from deep gashes along its flank. Punctual, Victor said without turning around. I appreciate that in a business partner. Let my sister go, Kira called, stepping into the light. You have what you want. Do I? Victor finally turned, and his smile was sharp enough to cut. Because what I want is the last Shadow Moon bloodline under my control. What I have is an awakened wolf with no training and a protective alpha who'll die before he lets me claim her. Then we have a problem. Indeed we do. Victor gestured to the wounded wolf at his feet. This is Timothy, one of your brother-in-law's employees. Turned out he had some interesting bloodline markers as well, distant Shadow Moon heritage, though nothing like yours. I was hoping he might provide some insight into your family's abilities. The wolf whimpered again, and Kira realized with horror that the creature was barely alive. Unfortunately, Victor continued, his gifts were limited. But his death won't be wasted. You see, Shadow Moon blood has certain properties that are quite useful in ritual magic. You're insane. I'm thorough. Victor's pale eyes fixed on her with predatory intensity. Your parents tried to deny their nature, tried to live as humans. Look where it got them. You could be so much more, Kira. With the right guidance, the right motivation. Over my dead body, Zane snarled, moving to stand beside her. That can be arranged. Victor raised his hand, and the 5 wolves stopped their prowling, focusing their attention on Zane with laser precision. Kill the alpha. Bring me the girl. The attack came fast, 5 werewolves moving with coordinated precision, their pale forms blurring with supernatural speed. Zane shifted mid-stride, his human form dissolving into the massive black wolf she'd seen in her dreams. But even as powerful as he was, 5 against 1 were impossible odds. Kira watched in horror as they swarmed him, their teeth flashing as they sought to drag him down. Zane fought with the savage grace of a born alpha, but there were too many of them. One of the wolves broke away from the pack, its cold eyes fixed on her with predatory hunger. It launched itself through the air, claws extended and fangs bared. Kira moved without thinking. Her hand shot out to catch the wolf mid-leap, her fingers closing around its throat with crushing force. The impact should have knocked her down, should have driven them both to the ground in a tangle of claws and teeth. Instead, she held the writhing werewolf suspended in the air as if it weighed nothing. The wolf's eyes went wide with shock and fear as it clawed frantically at her grip. But Kira's fingers were like steel bands, and she could feel something dark and terrible flowing through her, power that made her feel invincible. With a casual flex of her hand, she crushed the wolf's windpipe. It died with a strangled whimper, its body going limp in her grasp. She dropped it to the concrete floor and turned toward the remaining wolves with a smile that felt more predator than human. "My turn," she said. The second wolf hesitated, some primal instinct warning it that the prey had just become the predator. That moment of uncertainty was all Kira needed. She moved with speed that made the werewolves look slow, crossing the distance between them in a single bound. Her fist connected with the wolf's skull with a wet crack that echoed through the foundry. The third wolf tried to run. Kira caught it before it made it 10 feet, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to anticipate its movement. She grabbed it by the hind leg and swung it into one of the steel support pillars with enough force to dent the metal. The wolf hit the ground and didn't get up. The remaining 2 wolves released Zane and backed away, their ears flat against their skulls and their tails tucked in submission. Even in wolf form, their terror was obvious. "Impossible," Victor breathed, his pale face gone white with shock. "You're barely awakened. You shouldn't be that strong." Kira looked down at her hands, still human, still delicate-looking, but capable of crushing bone and steel. The dark power thrummed beneath her skin like a living thing, whispering promises of dominance and control. "Apparently," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the surviving wolves whimper, "I'm full of surprises." Victor's composure cracked, revealing the fear beneath his cold exterior. "You don't understand what you're becoming. The power will consume you, turn you into something monstrous." "Like you?" Kira took a step toward him, and he actually retreated. "You murdered my parents. You kidnapped my sister. You tortured an innocent man. I was protecting our species. You were protecting your own ambitions." She could end this now. The power flowing through her would make it easy, a single touch, and Viktor Morozov would cease to exist. The dark whispers in her mind urged her to do it, to claim her place as the apex predator she was meant to be. But then she heard Katie's muffled sob from across the room, and the human part of her reasserted itself. "Get out," she said quietly. "Take your surviving wolves and run. If I ever see you again, I won't be so merciful." Victor stared at her for a long moment, his pale eyes calculating. Then he smiled, a cold, sharp expression that promised future retribution. "This isn't over, little wolf. You've shown your true nature now. Every pack in the world will know what you are, what you're capable of. They'll come for you, and next time, they won't underestimate you." He gestured to his remaining wolves, and they slunk toward the exit like beaten dogs. Just before he disappeared into the shadows, Victor turned back. "Enjoy your power, Kira Nakamura. But remember, monsters are made, not born. And you've just taken your first step down that path." Then he was gone, leaving behind only the scent of blood and fear. Kira stood in the sudden silence, staring at the 3 bodies scattered around the foundry floor. She'd killed them. With her bare hands, without shifting, without even thinking about it. The power still thrummed beneath her skin, dark and seductive and terrifyingly addictive. Zane shifted back to human form and moved toward her carefully, as if approaching a wild animal that might bolt or attack. "Kira," he said quietly. "Look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his, and saw her reflection in those golden depths, saw the predator she'd become, the monster Victor had accused her of being. "I killed them," she whispered. "You protected your family. You protected me." Zane reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hands framed her face with infinite gentleness. "You did what any alpha would do." "I'm not an alpha." "Aren't you?" His smile was sad and beautiful and proud all at once. "You just commanded the submission of trained killers with nothing but your presence. You moved faster than wolves, hit harder than bears, and held back from delivering a killing blow when every instinct told you to eliminate the threat." "The power." She shuddered. "I wanted to kill him. I wanted to make him suffer for what he did to my parents. But you didn't. That's what makes you different from him." Zane's thumbs brushed away tears she didn't realize she'd shed. "That's what makes you worthy of the power you carry." Behind them, Katie made a muffled sound of distress, reminding them that the immediate crisis wasn't over. They had a traumatized human to deal with, bodies to dispose of, and a dying werewolf who might still be saved. But as Zane moved to free her sister, Kira remained frozen in place, staring at her hands and wondering if Victor had been right about one thing. Because the power flowing through her veins didn't feel like something that could be controlled or contained. It felt like something that would eventually consume everything in its path, including the man she was learning to love. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to be the first to get notified when the part 2 of this story drops.